Okay, so President Trump is finally sounding off about Roy Moore, but he's not actually speaking. So he sends out Sarah Huckabee Sanders to talk about it. So what is his position? Right, so Trump, who has a position on everything, right? He had a position on Jamel Hill at ESPN. He said she should be fired. He said that Colin Kaepernick is a son of a bitch who should be fired, right? Even though he wasn't really in the NFL at the time. And, you know, I may agree with his assessments on people who kneel for the anthem, and I may agree that Jamel Hill, not that she should be fired, I don't think she should have been fired, but that she was wrong in her assessment of politics. But he's been completely silent on Roy Moore for over a week, even though he endorsed Roy Moore after Roy Moore won the primary. So finally, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is trotted out to answer questions about Roy Moore. And what this does demonstrate, by the way, is that Sean Hannity and the White House are very much in coordination because, as you recall, Sean Hannity the night before last came out and said that he wanted to let the people of Alabama decide. The White House is giving exactly the same message. So that is a shift. Apparently, there were reports that Sean had been getting calls from Bannon and from the White House saying, back off Roy Moore a little bit. So the White House is also backing off of Roy Moore. Here's Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying that Trump thinks the people of Alabama ought to decide, which is a truism. Again, I said this yesterday. You know, when people say things like, let the people decide, what they're really saying is that they are not going to take a position. Right? That's really what they're saying. And that's stupid. Okay, Trump has taken a position on everything. I mean, literally everything. All the things Trump has taken a position on, but here he chooses to go strategically silent. The reason that that's bad is not just because I think it's immoral, even though I do think it's immoral. The reason that I think it's bad is because Donald Trump is one of the very few people in America who could actually make a difference in this Senate race and actually make sure that Republicans keep the seat without that seat being Roy Moore's. Here's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, though, basically kicking the can down the road.
The president believes that these allegations are very troubling and should be taken seriously, and he thinks that the people of Alabama should make the decision on who their next senator should be.
So that's a no. He thinks Roy Moore should stay in?
Look, the president said in his statement earlier this week that if the allegations are true, then that Roy Moore should step aside. He still firmly believes that.
Okay, so, you know, that doesn't mean anything. Right. We now know what we know. OK, nothing further is really going to come out here. The idea that if true, he should step aside, but let the people of Alabama decide. Again, the people of Alabama will decide. Right. But he can have an impact on this race. If you were to come out and say, Roy Moore, get out, people of Alabama, you know, don't lose the Senate race because of Roy Moore. That would actually have an impact in this race. But that's not what's happening here. And then, you know, and then Trump tweets. But so Trump doesn't say anything about Moore. Right. But he does have some things to say about Al Franken. So the allegations come out about Franken. He's been completely silent on Twitter, right? He's been over in Asia. This was the excuse for him not commenting on Moore. He comes back, and now he's on Twitter late at night. And so Trump starts tweeting about Al Franken. So he tweets the Al Frankenstein picture, and it's Frankenstein, right? But he spells Frankenstein I-E instead of E-I. Again, spell check. He says, the Al Frankenstein picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. Where do his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while she sleeps? Right? And then he continues along these lines. And he says, and to think that just last week he was lecturing anyone who would listen about sexual harassment and respect for women. Leslie Stahl tape? The Leslie Stahl tape is a reference to him making jokes about sexually abusing Leslie Stahl while she's asleep or something. Now, so, you know, Trump is perfectly willing to sound off about Franken. Now, a lot of people on the right love this about Trump, that he's not shy about sounding off about political opposition. And when it comes to the partisan battles, this is the thing that they really enjoy about Trump, is that Trump is always happy to throw a punch in the other direction. This is also really stupid strategy, okay? The reason this is stupid strategy is we are now going to get a full week of talk about all of the sexual harassment and abuse allegations against Donald Trump. Okay, there were something like 15 or 16 women who made sexual assault or harassment allegations against Trump at the end of the last election cycle. We had not yet had the Harvey Weinstein blow up, so now we're going to get to redo all of that, which is really, really exciting. And it's one of the reasons, by the way, I think that Trump has not actually come out and openly condemn Moore. Because the problem is that once you condemn Moore, once you get involved in these issues, now it comes back around to you, right? Just as Trump says, you know, Al Franken was talking about sexual harassment in a negative way, but then he was sexually harassing people. It's very hard for Trump to be the leader, the tip of the spear on sexual harassment and abuse. Right? Huckabee Sanders was specifically asked by a reporter over at Fox News about this, right? Here's Huckabee Sanders being asked to comment on the allegations against Trump.
We should find one set of allegations very troubling, and on the other, we shouldn't pay attention to them at all, or we should totally disbelieve them.
Well, I think the president has certainly a lot more insight into what he personally did or didn't do, and he spoke out about that directly during the campaign, and I don't have anything further to add beyond that.
Okay, so basically, we're going to keep silent on this because we don't want the blowback to come back around. This is the problem with having our standards. We have our own double standard. Okay, we have our own double standard, and then our politicians pay the price for the double standard. On the one hand, we say that if they're on our side, we don't care. care. And on the other hand, we say if they're not on our side, we do care. That double standard has ramifications for politicians because it means that Trump is going to want to condemn Al Franken. But if he condemns Al Franken, it's going to come back around to Trump. And then the right is going to have to suggest it was that the allegations about Trump are not credible, but the allegations against Franken are super credible, which I don't buy, by the way. I think the allegations against Trump were credible during the primaries. I think they were, or during the general election. I, again, don't say that you shouldn't have voted for Trump to stop Hillary, but I do think that, I didn't. I didn't vote at the top of the ticket because I take these things very, very seriously. So, the idea that we can have as a people this double standard in our mind, that has to change. So either we're going to say as a public one of two things. We care about these allegations enough to get rid of people. Doesn't matter their political affiliation. Or we don't care enough to get rid of people. Doesn't matter their political affiliation. We're going to have to make that decision. Otherwise, we just have this hypocritical standard. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the generalized societal problem that's coming up with some of these sexual harassment allegations. And that is, as I've said now for a couple of weeks, really 6 weeks since the Harvey Weinstein stuff broke, we as a society do not have a consistent standard that we're applying with regard to what sort of allegations to take seriously and what sort of allegations not to take seriously. So the reason that I say this is because we are treating sexual harassment allegations where a guy said something nasty and untoward to a woman, the same as we are treating rape allegations. And that seems to me not correct. I think that you can condemn both, but I don't think they are worthy of equal levels of condemnation. For example, there is the actress Ellen Page. And Ellen Page had this whole thing about a director she worked with or a fellow actor she worked with, I can't remember who she's talking about, who had said some, was it Ratner? It was about Ratner, I guess, who's had a lot of sexual allegations made against him. And she says that Brett Ratner at one point made some sort of nasty lesbian reference to her on the set. And this is bad. It is bad, okay? And he deserves to be condemned for that, obviously. And then she says in that same allegation, in the same Facebook post, she says that at one point she was sexually assaulted by a grip. Okay, these are not the same kind of thing. Right? They're both bad, but they're not quite the same kind of bad. Right? Rape and sexual assault are not the same thing as sexual harassment, and conflating the two actually ends up making light of sexual assault because it allows people to slough it off. It allows people to basically say, okay, that's the same as saying something nasty. Well, sexually harassing a woman and sexually assaulting a woman are not quite the same thing. They're both bad, but they are different levels of bad. Right? It's bad to hit a child. It's worse to kill a child. Right? It's bad to yell at somebody. It's much worse to hit somebody. So I think that we need to be careful about the standards that we apply, and also the credibility of particular standards. The reason that I've been so harsh on Roy Moore is because I find the allegations particularly credible because they're supporting details. It's the reason that I found Juanita Broderick to be credible. I think they're supporting details. She was in the place she said she was at the time she said she was. There were contemporaneous people that she had told at the time. But I think that one of the things that is going to happen now is the hysteria is so loud and so much that there's the possibility that we're going to jump to conclusions. We shouldn't jump to conclusions. I've called for a certain level of credibility, but I think that we should determine for ourselves what exactly that level of credibility is. In other words, I'm calling for a standard, because otherwise sexual harassment, sexual abuse, these are just going to become clubs that you can wield against the other side rather than a real attempt to cleanse the society of a grave evil. So I think that's worth commenting upon. Other comment that I want to make. So yesterday, I tweeted something, and all these feminists went nuts because they didn't understand what I was saying. I tweeted that it seems like the only solution here is robot politicians. I was not specifically speaking about sexual harassment. I was saying all of our politicians suck, and a lot of politicians are willing to cover for people who suck. Okay, Kirsten Gillibrand is one of them. She came out yesterday, and she said that Bill Clinton should have resigned in 1998. She was literally campaigning with him 6 months ago. So, no, okay, all of our politicians are garbage. You may get less sexual harassment if there are more women in Congress. I think you probably would. But that doesn't mean that the legislation would be any better or that they wouldn't cover for bad behavior. Okay, that's just the reality of the situation. We as a society have abandoned a particular moral standard, and that moral standard that comes with consequences. Okay, none of this arises in a vacuum. Sexual harassment, sexual abuse, these have always happened. But we also used to have certain standards of behavior that we demanded from our politicians and that we demanded from people more generally. Now we live in a society where those standards don't exist unless we almost randomly decide that they exist again. So set a consistent standard or don't have a standard at all. But this kind of pick and choose routine is very dangerous for the heart of our politics. Double standards don't work. Okay, so before